So the UN released a new report on climate change, and its conclusions are concerning, though not at all surprising. I read the summary for policymakers, and it basically lays out the worst, emphasizing that warming and the other effects of climate change are here to stay. The report also mentions that the window to act is becoming narrower, that the opportunities to stave off the worst effects of warming are shrinking. The implications behind the report are harrowing to say the least, and it does add to my eco-anxiety a bit. That's why I wanted to come here and put some of the report's findings into perspective, detailing the implications behind them and what should be our actions in response. The obvious finding was the fact that humans massively contributed to present warming, and that the release of greenhouse gases, mainly carbon dioxide, have been the main cause for that warming. In fact, the global temperatures have been around 1.1 degrees Celsius higher during the years of 2011 to 2020 than the years from 1850 to 1900. This has led to an increased prevalence of extreme weather events such as heat waves, massive precipitation events, droughts, and wildfires, which has been evident if you live in California or in Greece or Turkey. Sea levels have also increased, and on an ecological front, climate zones have shifted northward. All of this means that the effects of climate change are already here, and it's affecting every inhabited region on Earth. This also means that humans, as well as a myriad of other species on this Earth, are already facing the effects of warming. If you've been paying attention to climate news recently, all of these findings are not anything new. In recent years, the climate movement has been more vocal in bringing to attention the fact that people are already suffering under climate change. Flooding in Germany killed about 200 people alone this year, and wildfires in California destroyed an entire town there. There's also a myriad of climate disasters that don't reach the news here, but which disproportionately affect the people in the global south. Disasters that include monsoons, typhoons, and water crises through droughts. So yeah, it's extremely clear that warming has already affected millions of people throughout the world, and future warming has the potential to affect millions, if not billions more. One of the most depressing parts of this report is that it does show that it will be extremely difficult to maintain warming under 1.5 degrees Celsius. The reason why we don't want to go much above that mark is because 1.5 degrees Celsius does potentially lock in extreme weather events such as hurricanes, droughts, and wildfires, with the intensities of those events potentially being greater than what we're observing today. The human consequences of those events could potentially be vast and can carry with them political implications that are concerning to think about, to say the least. This is usually the place where I stop with everything and go on a diatribe that seeks to inspire hope into people. But I'm not going to lie. This report did hit me hard, even though I was aware of the severity of this crisis before. I think we all were to a point. The most privileged of us, however, chose to block it out of our minds for the time being, only for our worries to re-emerge at the time this report got released, which, if I can be frank, speaks to how climate communication hasn't achieved the necessary step of ingraining this issue in people's minds, at least in the minds of the most powerful and influential people among us. This is no fault of the climate activists and communicators, but largely the fault of the political news media. Emily Atkins mentions how IPCC report day is one of the only days where the entire political news media communicates climate science to the public, which means that the largest crisis of our time is receiving minimal news attention on a daily basis. I know this can all seem frightening and something entirely out of our control. At times since the report, I felt like that also. I hope that everyone is taking care of themselves as best as they know. But I still want to caution against climate doomerism. I want to reiterate that if you think it's too late to address climate change, then you're actively engaging in climate denialism. Look, it is a fact that we have locked in future warming that can potentially be hard to stop. And it is a fact that we only have a small window of opportunity to act to maintain warming at 1.5 degrees Celsius. It will require massive efforts on our parts. But all of those facts shouldn't discourage action. Rather, they should motivate you to act. Yes, your feelings of doom and sadness and depression are valid, and you should be allowed to feel them deeply. Once those feelings have subsided, however, You should allow yourself to get angry. Angry at the fossil fuel companies who spent millions on a disinformation campaign to sow seeds of doubt to the public and buy up our government. And angry at the politicians who refuse to hold those companies and executives accountable. We are not all to blame for this crisis, and anyone who spouts that talking point is lying. The ones who are to blame are known, and because of them, a massive amount of life on this planet is threatened. So what is there to do? For one, individual actions are not all that useless as people regard them as. One action that you can do right now, and this is if you can, is eating a majority plant-based diet. Meat consumption contributes to a large amount of greenhouse gas emissions each year, and going plant-based is one way to lower your own footprint. Another thing you can do is take public transit more if you have access to any in your area. If you don't have any, then switching over to an electric vehicle, a hybrid car, or a more fuel-efficient car can lower your footprint also. Obviously, that depends on if you can afford to, much like if you can afford to spend money on renewable energy to power your home. But by and large, the most important individual action you can do right now is just consume less. Consume less meat. Buy clothing only when you need it. Drive only when you have to. Try to be more fuel efficient by buying better light bulbs, spending money on renewable energy, or just by using less electricity at home. These individual actions merely scratch the surface, however, and overfixation on them distracts from the true issue, and that is the structure of our entire society. Collective action, by far, is the most important type of action that anyone can engage in. Vote and campaign for candidates that are committed to climate action, but don't stop at electoralism. Organize marches and sit-ins and other forms of direct action to pressure politicians to act. Engage in lawsuits that seek to make fossil fuel companies pay for the willful destruction of this planet. Don't stop making noise even after the politicians and executives hear your voice. Make them be afraid of you. Make them so afraid that they know what the consequences are if they don't act, or if they try to back away from any type of accountability for their actions. In your communities, create mutual aid networks to care for one another. Organize mutual funding drives to buy clean power for everyone in your community. Create community gardens so that everyone can have readily available fresh foods that don't waste miles to reach you. Organize ways to distribute leftover meals and leftover food items to people who need it, and engage in composting for food waste that has genuinely gone bad. Create carpool days with members of your community to drive everyone to and from work so that you're consuming less fuel. Make sure everyone is taken care of, especially anyone with an otherwise identity. We must all act as one to get through this crisis. And that all starts with taking back our communities from any type of reactionary. And I know that we will.